All right, Shalom. Before I begin, I would like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ruach Kodash. Double honors to my teachers, the apostles, and the elders of Great Millstone, the men whom I've learned this truth from, and also Shalom and salutations to the elect. All right, so I'm the brother Shaquat from the branch of Great Millstone, Montreal. I'm back with another lesson. And this lesson that I'm going to be getting into today is going to be entitled Statement Analysis. All right. And this video was basically inspired, by a video that I watched a while back, a while ago, probably a week or two ago, from the elder Rachaya Kwam from London. And he basically did a video that introduced me to this concept of statement analysis. And that video he did was he basically showed an excerpt from Eric Hunley, and Eric Hunley was accompanied by somebody else. I forgot his name. His name was Mark something. And Mark, he was going into, he basically dives into statement analysis, deals with the FBI and things like that, and so on and so forth, right? Reading people, right? So, and something that sparked, this lesson was something that they went into, right? Dealing with King Solomon and the two women that had children. The woman that had that one child that died, she rolled over him and then she basically stole the other woman's child and, claimed it as her own and replaced the dead child, with the other woman. But, King Solomon's judgment and the conclusion he came to figure out who was telling the truth and who was lying about whose child was whose. If you see it, if you're using spiritual eyes, right, you will see that they went into this, right? The video that the elder Rachaya Kwam, the excerpt that he showed, these men went into this. They broke it down. But King Solomon basically used statement analysis to come to the conclusion of whose child was who was telling the truth. So that's basically what sparked this lesson. So let me begin by getting what statement analysis is and what it means. All right, so this is the AI overview in Google. It says statement analysis is a technique used to assess the truthfulness or deception in a statement, either written or verbal. It involves examining the content and style of the statement to identify patterns that may indicate dishonesty or hidden meanings, right? So that's basically pretty much a summary of what statement analysis is, right? It's basically detecting a lie through somebody's words and how they phrase it, to simplify it, and the reason why I was inspired to do this lesson is because this technique, if learned, right, because we don't really have to master statement analysis. We don't have to get too deep into it, right? But it's good to know a few things, and put into your arsenal, right? You don't have to get all deep into it, but it's good because being in the truth, we're supposed to learn about a lot of things, to the best of your ability, whatever your spirit is into, right? But you're allowed to indulge or dive into these different things, and once again, not really too deep, because the truth is the number one focus, but this technique of detecting lies and falsehood, and people is good because it would help us in our day-to-day, if I speak for myself, but it helps because there's a lot of people out here that are, liars, man. Hence what the scriptures say about the ruler, of a place and the subjects. The subjects take on the spirit of the ruler. So the majority of these people are liars and thieves and robbers, man. And we're in this world, so we have to deal with these sort of people, right? But then it's good to be able to basically filter out who's genuine and who's not, right? Because the scriptures also speak about using mammon, right? Us being able to use mammon, making friends of mammon, right? Making friends of this world to basically better your situation, But if you are able to detect who's genuine and who's not, who's telling the truth, through their words, that's beneficial to you. And it's not just their words too, right? Body language plays a factor and other things, But today I just want to focus on statement analysis and get an example in the scriptures, right? And another reason to dive into this, or put your feet into this, right? But not fully in, it's good to learn, for lack of better words, right? Is because we are judges as well, right? We are judges. We're, basically kings being groomed to or prepare for the next kingdom, right? And a king, he's a judge, man. Basically judging between situations, right? So let me get Psalms 82 and verse 6. It says, I have said ye are gods, and all of you are the children of the Most High, right? So these gods that Psalms, the 82nd chapter, is referring to is the Israelites, the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. We are gods, right? And we are the children of the Most High. That's who the children of the Most High are. The Israelites, the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, right? But why does it refer to us as gods? And notice, it's a lowercase g, right? So what does it mean when, the scriptures refer to the children of Israel as gods? So you got to look up the word. And the word in the Hebrew is Strong's H 430, right? So when we look at the Hebrew characters, this is the character Ah, this is the character La, this is the character Ha, this is the character Ya, and this last character, which is at the end, is Ma, right? So, which would just be an M. So Allahayim, right? Allahayim in the Hebrew. And what does it mean by Allahayim? When we look at the definition, the outline of biblical usage, it says rulers, judges, divine ones, angels, gods, right? So the Israelites, the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, they are known as gods, or in other words, rulers, judges, divine ones, angels, gods, plural, right? But what I want to emphasize is that rulers and judges, I want to emphasize those two words because being a ruler and a judge, you have to be able to deal with cases and come to the right conclusion of a judgment. You have to come to the right judgment, and a part of coming to the right judgment is dealing with this one concept that I'm going to get into, which is statement analysis, right? And these things, statement analysis, psychology, and understanding people's minds and their traits and their character and reading people is something that King Solomon was into as well, right? And King Solomon is our forefather, right? And most likely the majority of our forefathers were into that, because that goes into reading spirits, all right? Discerning spirits, right? And discernment is something that's pushed in the scriptures, right? Basically discerning between two things, So let's go from there to the book of Wisdom of Solomon 7 and verse 20. It says, then matter of fact, 17, and I'm gonna jump to 20. Wisdom of Solomon 7 and verse 17. It says, for he had given me certain knowledge of the things that are, namely to know how the world was made and the operations of the elements, right? So King Solomon was given a portion of wisdom that could not be compared to any other man that was before him or after him, right? And, the Lord revealed a great deal of wisdom, a great portion of wisdom and understanding to King Solomon, right? So jumping to verse 20, it says, the natures of living creatures and the furies of wild beasts, right? So King Solomon understood, animals, right? Wild beasts, the violence of winds, right? And the reasonings of men, the diversities of plants, and the virtues of roots, But what I want to emphasize here is the reasoning of men, which goes into psychology and understanding people, right? And how people, and why people are the way they are, right? Body language and so on and so forth. All right. Okay, so let's jump into the lesson. I want to get a little bit more on the definition of statement analysis, right? Because it goes into it more in detail. So number one, it says purpose of statement analysis, detecting deception. Statement analysis is used to identify potential signs of deception, such as inconsistencies, omissions, or unusual word choices in statements made during investigations or interviews. Identifying hidden meaning, right? It can also help uncover underlying motives, basis, or the emotional state of the person making the statement. Assessing credibility. By analyzing the language used, investigators can assess the reliability and credibility of a statement, right? 2, it says techniques used in statement analysis, examining context. Investigators, right? And, being a judge, you also have to be an investigator as well, right? Or a ruler, It says investigators look for factual discrepancies, contradictions, or omissions in the statement, analyzing language patterns. This includes looking at the use of pronouns, nouns, verbs, and adverbs, as well as the overall structure and flow of the statement, right? So, dealing with this part, because when somebody's trying to lie or somebody's lying, you can really, if you're paying attention, you could tell somebody's lying versus somebody that's actually telling the truth and is sure about what they're talking about, right? And there's little indicators in their statements that could basically lead you to that conclusion of them, okay, this guy's lying, right? Like how they say words, right? And it's gonna go into it, but I want to say this, right? Dealing with somebody that's telling the truth, you're gonna know because there's no pauses or gaps or them trying to bring out what they're the truth. They're trying to present it in a particular way. They're going to tell you the truth how it is, especially if they've been wrong, right? If somebody's been wrong, they're going to tell, this person did this to me and it was this time, but pop, 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 it just comes out pop, 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 fluently, versus somebody that's lying and trying to basically make the lie a truth, so they're going to struggle with that. And they're going to use particular words and, it's going to go into it. It says identifying patterns of deceptions. Some common patterns include lack of detail, right? Deceptive statements may be vague or lack specific details, so they're going to leave out particular details, right? Redundancy. It says deceptive individuals may repeat information or use unnecessary words. Why? Because they're trying to basically scramble and try to make a lie the truth, right? use of qualifiers. Words like actually, kind of, or sort of may indicate that the person is hedging or trying to soften the impact of their statement, right? Omissions, leaving out relevant information, can be a sign of deception, right? So this is, just a few examples of how you can pick out a liar or tell a liar, right, from someone who's telling the truth, dealing with a case that's brought to you. And you need to basically discern between the two, right? But statement analysis does not always work, right? And I believe it goes into it in this breakdown. It says limitations of statement analysis, right? Subjectivity. It says interpretations of statement analysis findings can be subjective, and different analysis may draw different conclusions. Damn, it's a lucky, right? So if you have two different people that are looking at the same case, they might come to a different conclusion. So that's a downside of it. It says not foolproof. Statement analysis is not a perfect tool, and it can be influenced by factors such as the individual's personality, emotional state, and cultural background, right? For example, if a person is not fluent in English, or their background is like they've been damaged emotionally, they're obviously you might not be able to pinpoint that, okay, they're lying or they're telling the truth, because that's who they are, right? That's just, they can't really present it in a bold way, right? So that's a downside of statement analysis, right? Okay, so let me get into it. This is the book of Susanna, and it's one chapter, and I'm gonna start at verse, let's see, right, I'm gonna start at verse 15. It says, and it fell out as they watched a fit time, she went in as before, and Shalaki says, with two maids only, and she was desirous to wash herself in the garden, for it was hot, and there was nobody save the two elders that had hid themselves and watched her. It says, then she said to her maids, bring me oil and washing balls, and shut the garden doors that I may wash me. And they did as she bade them, and shut the garden doors, and went out themselves at private doors, to fetch the things that she commanded them. But they saw not the elders, because they were hid, right? And these two elders were men or judges in Israel at that time, right? To sum it up, they were basically stalking her, and because they fell in love with her, they were wooed by Susanna. But Susanna was already married to a man. She was already, she was married to a man. So these two elders, which were judges of Israel, they were going off, right? Verse 19. Now when the maids were gone forth, the two elders rose up and ran unto her, saying, behold, the garden doors are shut, that no man can see us, and we are in love with thee. Therefore consent unto us and lie with us. So they wanted to basically make her commit adultery. And what is adultery? Is a woman sleeping with another man that's not her man. That's adultery. Verse 21, it says, if thou wilt not, we will bear witness against thee that a young man was with thee, and therefore thou didst send away thy maidens from thee. So they came with a plan, a lie, to cover up their motives. If you don't do this, this is what we're going to tell the people that happened instead. All right, and we're going to be in the clear. That was their mindset. Verse 22, then Susanna sighed and said, I am strained on every side. For if I do this thing, it is death unto me. And if I do it not, I cannot escape your hands. It is better for me to fall into your hands, right, for you guys to kill me and not do it, than to sin in the sight of the Lord, right? So she was a righteous woman, right? Verse 24, with that, Susanna cried with a loud voice, and the two elders cried out against her. Then ran the one and opened the door, the garden door. So the servants of the house heard the cry in the garden. They rushed in at a private door to see what was done unto her, right? So I'm going to stop it there, right? And that also goes to show that Susanna was in the right spirit, because when you also read up earlier, it says her father, her parents, basically brought her up in the law of Moses. And a part of the law of Moses was that if you're going to get raped, if you're a woman and you're going to get raped and you don't want it to happen, you're promised to somebody, you're supposed to scream out for help as loud as you can. And that's what Susanna did, right? Showing you that she's a righteous woman, because if you did that and they still went through with it, if you didn't want it and the man, whatever, went through with it, that man would have to be put to death, right? Those were the accounts, right? So let me jump a bit to get to the conclusion and how, because these men were brought to court, right? And basically there had to have been, there was a judgment to figure out who was, court was in session, and it had to be figured out who was telling the truth and who was telling a lie, right? So let's jump. And the way this was found out was through statement analysis, right? And it was through Daniel, which was a young man at that time, right? Daniel basically, what the fuck? Let's do it. Let's see. Right. Verse 45. Therefore, when she was laid to be put to death, the Lord raised up the Holy Spirit of a young youth whose name was Daniel, who cried with a loud voice, I am clear through the blood of this woman. Right. And if you're falsely accused, the Lord is going to have it where it works in your favor at times, man, because the Lord knows. Verse 46, who cried with a loud voice, I am clear to and fro of this woman, for the blood of this woman. And all the people turned them towards him and said, what mean these words that thou hast spoken? So he, standing in the midst of them, said, are ye such fools, ye sons of Israel, that that without examination or knowledge of the truth ye have condemned a daughter of Israel? Return again to the place of judgment, for they have borne false witness against her. Wherefore all the people turned again in haste, and the elders said unto him, come, sit down among us, and show it us, seeing the Most High had given thee the honor of an elder. Then said Daniel unto them, put these two aside, one far from another, and I will examine them. Right. So what Daniel did was separate them. He said, yo, get this one out of my sight, put them in two different rooms or whatever the case was, but he separated them, right, so he can examine them. And it says, verse 52, so when they were put asunder one from another, he called one of them and said unto him, O thou that art waxen old in wickedness, now thy sins which thou hast committed aforetime are come to light. Right, so this was not the first time this was attempted by this elder, right, of Israel at that time, Verse 53, for thou hast pronounced false judgment and hast condemned the innocent and hast let the guilty go free. Albeit the Lord saith, the innocent and the righteous shalt thou not slay. Now then, if thou hast seen her, if you were there and you're telling the truth, tell me, under what tree sawest thou them companying together? Right, because the lie was that, they saw Susanna with a young man, right? So Daniel said, if you were there, tell me, what tree did you see them under and basically having sex, right? And then he said, who answered, under a mastic tree, right? And it says, and Daniel said, very well, thou hast lied against thine own head. For even now the angel of the Most High, Yahweh, had received the sentence of the Most High to cut thee in two. Right? And then basically Daniel did the same thing with the other man. Right? He sent the other one away and brought the other one in and asked him the same question. And guess what? That statement was, his statement was different from the other one. But if they were both there, then they would have seen the same tree, it would have been the same, So that's how Daniel found out the lie, was through their statements. And that's one example, of many examples in the scriptures that you could detect statement analysis being used, or detect a lie through statement analysis, and like I said earlier, King Solomon was one too, right? Because how the statements were phrased with which woman was more concerned about the dead and alive child. King Solomon could come to the conclusion, okay, she's telling the truth, she's telling a lie. And obviously the Spirit of the Lord has to be dealing with you to be able to maneuver like that. So Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. Call Halayimla, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Hakodash. Once again, double honors to my teachers, the apostles, and the elders of Great Millstone. Until next time, Shalom.